Answer that one, didn't you?
And I've got my phone.
So, sorry, didn't mean to say yes.
Okay, it's 7 p.m. I call to order this meeting of the Middlebury Development Review Board for August 12th, 2019. I'll briefly go over the two business items that we have tonight. The first one is a application request by Virginia Logan for a proposed two-lot subdivision of property located at 32 High Street. The second application is for a request by 29 Seminary Street LLC for a conditional use approval for assisted living facility at 29 Seminary Street. Next, are there any public communications from anyone on anything other than what's on the agenda tonight? Hearing none. We'll go to the approval of DRB minutes for 7/22/2019. Is there a motion?
I move we approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion, changes, comments, questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain. Wasn't here.
Okay. So the first public hearing tonight is a sketch plan application request by Virginia Logan for a proposed two-lot subdivision of property located at 32 High Street. Pursuant to section 561, the DRB will review the proposal for general compliance with the zoning, Middlebury zoning. Final plat, public hearing approval will be sought at a later date. The subdivision proposed is located in the high-density residential district, parcel 025167. If the applicants would want to come forward, introduce yourselves, and then I will issue the oath. And the oath will be for the applicants and any interested person and those who wish to participate in the hearing tonight. If you'll take the oath now, then you will be able to speak later on. Do you affirm that the evidence and information you are giving in this proceeding is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Please raise your hand, anyone that's going to participate. Thank you.
Okay, can I just have you three folks back there, your names?
Lori London.
Okay,
Shirley Price.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else that is going to participate in this hearing? Okay. Yeah. Okay. At this time, I would ask the members of the board if any member has a conflict of interest regarding this application. Also, at this time, does any member wish to disclose any ex parte conversations concerning this case? Thank you. Okay, if you'd like to briefly explain what you...
Jason Barnard and Jarvis. I'm here with Virginia Logan tonight. We're the designers, surveyors for the subdivision. As the summary states, it's a 0.54, 0.52 acre parcel. We have we've done the boundary survey just to confirm the acreage before we started. It is in the high density district. There is enough acreage for the property. As you can see, 32 is a little bit grainy here. You can see. Yeah. High Street North, there's the existing access to Valero's residence to the north. Excuse me.
If you could use the pointer and stand to the side so that the camera there can see you.
As proposed, you can see where the subdivision line in red runs generally southeast and northwest. 0.27 acres for lot 1 and lot 2. We're trying to keep an even division line between the property. The goal of Miss Logan is to build a smaller house just for herself. It is, as you can tell by the topography, there are steep slopes to get up into the driveway. That coupled with stormwater runoff, some drainage, that'll be sort of the biggest trick, the biggest challenge to getting up into the property to get the access. Two things. One thing that was done last week, we have done some ledge probes. We know that we're free of ledge down to at least 10 feet. The goal is to do a basement garage underneath the house so we are able to cut grade, get back in. This boundary line may ultimately change configuration a little bit so that we can slide the house down a little bit further to the west to compensate for some of that grade change. The new house will be served by municipal water and sewer, as stated in the summary. Relatively simple. There is a manhole right out by the street, right near Mrs. Logan's property, and the water main runs up alongside the street as well. So, really straightforward in terms of the subdivision. Again, we know that the biggest trick, biggest challenge, not trick, but the biggest challenge is going to be getting access, maintaining the 10% slope or less on the grades. There is a big tree that's right near the property line that's on the adjoining parcel. That will be, we're going to try to, any filling or any cutting, it's going to have to be done with retaining walls, most likely to keep some of those slopes back. And then stormwater generally sheet flows across the site in a westerly direction, so that'll have to be captured, diverted, put into a nearest catch basin so that it doesn't just spill out from the driveway onto High Street, because I know that's sort of an issue now with how the road bisects that slope and water seems to run off your existing driveway and sort of runs off onto High Street. So that will be one of the things along with others, but mainly access is going to be the challenge, coming up with those grades, retaining walls, protection of the tree, which you can sort of just barely see by the orthos, and I'd say that's a pretty sizable tree that's located on near the property or just on your property. So those are some of the design parameters that we'll be working with. And any questions?
As far as the access, existing access, would that have to be modified, for instance, to,
The existing driveway?
right, well,
It shouldn't be modified to a point where it does start to swing where we go back up onto lot 2.
okay,
At that point, it would have to be, you'd have a cut on one side and the retaining wall on the other side.
so that fire trucks and emergency vehicles would be able to get up in there.
Correct.
It seems to me that the main point about reviewing the proposal for general compliance is the access, the 10% grade. Have you not done any measuring pertaining to
We've
that?
actually gone out, we've taken some we've done topographic survey data. It's really close with the existing driveway to 10%. It's right on 10%. That, we have not done any design of the new driveway because we're not at that point yet.
So you're saying you haven't measured for the new driveway to see if it's within the 10%?
We haven't designed the new driveway. We haven't done the cuts and fills to
Right.
get the access up there.
Right.
That's correct.
But,
Not part of the sketch plan, you wouldn't go through the full cross-section of the driveway design.
okay.
It's still the conceptual phase.
Yeah, I think just, if it's okay, just to remind the board,
Yes.
as a sketch plan, because it's kind of funky in our bylaws, this is actually not a warned hearing, okay? It's an informal opportunity to determine if the subdivision is a major or minor. And then, once that's determined, identify the red flag areas that might be a problem for the applicant to bring it to a final plat stage. And I think, what's being expressed by Ann and the driveway and the stormwater issues, those are all issues that the applicant will certainly need to address in the final plat hearing.
Other questions from the board at this time?
The existing drive to the north of the house, if I have this clear in my mind, says that is paved. Is that a driveway to nowhere at this point?
That's the driveway to the Laros property. They
Right.
have a deeded easement over this Logan's property.
Okay. All right. So, and that was the old Parizo
Yes.
residence, okay, so now okay. So will that interfere with their access at all?
No. No, it won't
Okay.
impede their access.
So just, those are 1-foot topos on the ortho, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so just a sort of a rough look from where you come off High Street up to the, sort of the face of the new structure. It looks like 20 topos over 120-ish feet. So it's about a 16% grade if you just drove up the hill.
Correct.
So you're taking down the hill by, the elevation at the top has to come down by approximately a third, is that right?
Yeah, and it
Of
may
that?
even go a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
And maybe going closer to 8 feet by the time you get.
Yeah, 7 or 8 feet.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the kind of retaining. In best practice for that, is that generally something you would step for a wall like that, or?
When we looked at it, we haven't really gotten too far, but you're basically gonna have a wall on the upper side and then a wall on the lower side, in order to hold stuff back. There is a shed, maybe you can see it with the pointer.
Yep.
That's, either that's gonna have to go, or there's gonna have to be a wall above it to sort of step it down.
Yeah, I don't mean to ask you unfair questions, I was just trying to understand what the problem is that you're gonna face to get compliant here.
It's gonna be a tight radius. That's probably the biggest trick. You can, when we did a ledge test pit right up in above where the shed is, so we were able to get down 10 feet, assuming we have a little more clearance if we had to. The biggest thing is gonna be a tight radius to get back up on the lot too. And keep in mind, again, these are still tax map, so those lines may switch, shift one way or the other depending on, we get our survey in.
In terms of process, you'll do a micro survey before you do a cut and fill plan? You'll,
We've actually shot all the topo when we were out
Oh.
doing the boundary work.
Have you looked, I know you haven't done the design of the driveway yet, but have you looked at that turn on that nearly 10% existing driveway?
The turn up,
Yeah, as you make the turn onto the new driveway off the existing driveway, are you gonna be able to mitigate that without changing the Laros driveway?
we're gonna have to come off, you almost see where there's a flat sort of, it comes up and then it does start to level off just before the corner of the property.
Okay.
That's where that's gonna have to go, and it looks like that tax map may be a little bit further south based on the survey, but we're still processing that data.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board at this time? Any other comments from staff? This time?
The only thing I'd offer is that this is just a two-lot subdivision. It doesn't impact infrastructure. It doesn't require any new building of infrastructure at this point. The exception might be the stormwater. So if the stormwater line has to be extended up the road to accommodate the stormwater that's coming off the property, then it technically would be considered a major application. If it doesn't, and it can be handled somewhere else, it'd be just a minor application. But it's the extension of the infrastructure that creates triggers a major review.
Okay, we can, if we consider it a minor application, we can still get comments from both the fire and emergency.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And we would anyways.
Okay.
I request those for every hearing.
Excuse
I
my
have one
ignorance,
question.
is High Street a town road? It's not designated otherwise, right?
It's a town highway.
I guess I just have one question, Kevin, if
Yeah.
that's okay. Was there any reason, Jason, why you didn't put the house further, further south on the site, further away from the neighbor to the
Provide a
north?
little more separation from the existing house.
Yeah,
That was sort of where, it's not really gonna be, that's not the final house placement. It's still.
yeah. Maybe moving it down will actually help you with the grading of
And we
the
did
driveway
talk
too.
about actually maybe shifting some of the property lines, the north line down, the subdivision line. So that's still in sort of the planning.
Because it would be important to the board, I'm sure, to mitigate any stormwater that's running onto neighboring properties as well. Okay.
Dave, could we get our picture back, please?
Oh, maybe. Come on. This one's-
Okay, at this time, I would open it up for public comment. If you would like to comment or have questions, if you would give us your name and
My name is Ann Larrow, and my husband Glenn and I own the property that's immediately north, obviously, of Virginia's, okay if I call you Virginia, property. Dave, did you get my email with the pictures, or should I hand out pictures
I don't know that when did you send them in?
this morning? And that's okay.
Okay, I
brought
didn't-
copies, and you may or may not want them. I've had conversations, we've had conversations, probably 3, I think, so far with Virginia, about her plans to subdivide and build on her current lot. I think they've all been cordial, I might even describe them as friendly, so I know, we understand that Virginia has a right to develop her property, but I do want to disclose that I let Virginia know I'm not in favor of this development, and that if she was open to it, Glenn and I would like to engage in conversation about a subdivision where we acquire part of that property so that it wouldn't get developed. I just want to disclose that in transparency. I've also talked with Virginia about the 4 primary concerns I have, and I'll start with the maple tree. When we purchased the house, there were 2 fully grown maple trees. I mean, they're still growing, but on the southern border of our property. And the second maple tree, which is behind the one that Jason pointed to, has actually died, and I'll get back to why I'm mentioning that in a few minutes. But that tree that's living, the center of it is about 6 to 8 feet from the southern border of our property line, which runs along the fence line. There's a fence portion of our backyard. The branches of that tree extend well over into Virginia's property, and our understanding is that the roots extend proportionate to the tree branches. So depending on the site of her driveway and the foundation, we are concerned that root damage from both excavation and grade changes will open the tree up to disease, will create stress on the tree because it'll remove some of the absorbing roots, and it will also jeopardize, ultimately, for both of those reasons, the structural support of the tree, which will create a hazard. I'm glad to hear about the results of the ledge test. I knew that the person had come to do the backhoeing. I wasn't aware of what those results were. I don't understand enough about building to know exactly what if you've tested the entire area where you'd be going. I know that neighbors to the north of us during a subdivision had to recite their house plan the day they came to do the foundation because of ledge discovery that would have required blasting. The maple tree that I referred to earlier that died on our property has sustained root damage during mowing, our own damage during mowing, because the roots of that tree, as the living as well as the dead, have hit ledge and had to come up above the surface of the ground in various parts because they can't grow through the ledge. I know there's at least 2 areas on Virginia's property where ground rock, below ground rock peaks above the surface. And if there's ledge in the ground of the new lot, which is likely, I'm told, and again, I don't know a lot about building and construction, but I'm told that it could require blasting. And it's my understanding that a pre-blasting inspection and certification would need to occur, and that any damage done to our property as a result of the blasting would be on the shoulders of the company doing the blasting as well as the property owner requesting the blasting. And I have included in the pictures that I have, the east and south walls of our garage when we purchased the property actually have cracks in the foundation of the garage, and that's the southern end of our home. I'm not a good judge of space, but it would be relatively close to where they would need to do any blasting if needed, and I understand that we don't know if it's needed. But I have concerns about the damage to those walls if blasting work needs to occur, and how that impact on those walls would be monitored over the course of any work that needs to be done. My third area of concern is drainage, which Jason's talked about. We're both at the bottom of Chipman Hill. Obviously, we get significant water drainage during spring runoff and during storms. If you were looking at the pictures of the garage, you would see that there's significant hydro pressure on the eastern wall of our house coming off of Chipman Hill. The cracks in the garage show that, for example, this past week there were days when there's water literally coming through and dripping down the back wall of our garage. So a foundation on the hillside to the south of us is going to change water flow in that area, and we have concerns that it could potentially divert additional water from properties higher on the east side, so like in back of where the proposed house site would be, that foundation would divert water, and we could wind up with additional water flow on an already stressed area in our backyard. And that additional water flow could also impact that maple tree whose root system may be suspect because of the excavation work done for the foundation and the driveway. And the last area of concern that I have, so I am coming to the end, is the driveway. So as mentioned, the bottom 2/3, give or take, of our driveway is a deeded right-of-way across the northern section of Virginia's current lot. Our property deed doesn't actually indicate who's responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of that right-of-way, but it has been us. We've been snow blowing it for 19 years now, and we did just have it resurfaced last year because it had degraded to the point where a frost heave was preventing vehicles from getting up it. Virginia and I did have a conversation about a desire to, Jason talked about the access, and she talked about the possibility of coming up in a kind of an S and going back into her property. My understanding of where she's suggesting that is across the parking area that we currently use, so we wouldn't be able to offer or agree to a right-of-way in that space because we park our cars there. And the water drainage that we referred to earlier is substantial, and it runs down our driveway, and we believe that wherever Virginia may wind up placing a driveway in her plan, that there is going to be a significant increase in storm runoff, both on the shared driveway and ultimately into the public right-of-way. And the last area under driveway that I wanted to comment on is that both utility access and emergency vehicle access, which I heard Kevin Newton ask about earlier, will be challenging with that shared right-of-way and the right-hand turn that would be necessary to get into access that back lot. So those are my concerns. And again, if you would like to see the pictures, I can give you guys copies of them.
Sure, if you'd like to.
I'm Glenn Larrow. The nearest storm drain is actually at the top of Seminary Street, or Stewart Lane, excuse me, or it's just north of our house.
Is it all one set,
between
or do I distribute them?
of mine. So that's a long stretch.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I'm sorry, could we clarify Mr. Laro's last comment? Could we ask somebody to point out the nearest stormwater
Well,
inlet?
Stewart Lane is below where the map, maybe Dave can
Right.
scroll.
Okay. I know which street it is now.
It's at the intersection.
Yeah.
Be right in here somewhere.
Yep.
Those are pictures of the maple tree, pictures of the garage tracks, and then pictures of the driveway in general, so.
Can I add to the turn with your parking area? That would actually go, and I've talked about this with Virginia, that would actually start before where you're parking. So that would. And to go over the wall would be the outside.
Okay. Anybody else with any comments? Okay. Any other questions from the board at this time?
Can we direct our questions to
Sure.
the applicant
Yes.
still? Okay. So I just, I'm just looking at the driveway again, and it seems to me that, most of the challenge, most of the grade is actually in the beginning half of the driveway in terms of the steepness of the topos. Is that fair to say?
It's LiDAR contours may change based on.
Right, of course, yeah, subject to proof. So I have a pretty simple question, it's probably for the applicant more than, is the house where you want it, is the proposed house where you want it? It's not being driven by the regulatory need to get a longer driveway to achieve the grade, right?
Say that again?
Is the house as proposed is where you would want to build your house?
On the map?
Yeah.
Like no.
It
Oh.
may actually come forward a little bit from where it is
Oh, okay.
and slide south a little bit.
Depending on how you can manage the grade.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
Right now, where the subdivision line is drawn, to keep away from the shed, keep everything within zoning requirements. But that can be altered, again, that subdivision line can go, we can set a pin, we can have a break point, we can put it at a little different angle, so we can sort of change that, David, in
Yeah.
order to expand the building envelope to the west, which I think may help when we sort of get right at the breakoff point of where the crest of the hill is. That would allow
Yeah.
better access for the driveway. That's what we've talked about.
If I can just mention to the board, do you understand what I'm concerned about? So when people enact driveway grade regulations, one unintended consequence is sometimes that people make driveways that are longer than necessary in order to get past the steep part and then even it out,
Right.
right? So you end up not serving the intent of the regulation. That's what I just wanted to make sure, and it doesn't sound like that's what's going on.
No, that likelihood of that will slide to the west some.
Okay. Thank
Based
you.
on our testaments, obviously, we didn't put the lawn full of holes, we did our ledge probe, but we did pick an area that's 56 feet or so above that shed, that's more or less where the house is gonna be placed. And then once we get the house location as Virginia is looking for it, that's when we'll start looking at the driveway access.
Thank you.
So,
With actual ground contour.
25-foot setback.
so there could be, the proposal could be that the house would be moving away from the Laro line?
Moving west and slightly south, correct.
Okay, which would alleviate damage to the tree.
Correct.
I don't think there is a
And
front
also
setback
allow
on this.
for grading on between the Laro and Virginia's property to get water.
So this is probably 15, not 25.
Ultimately, that water is going to have to be captured and sent somewhere because, as we know now, it all comes out of High Street, even from the Laro's property. So everything's flowing to the west. There's a little interceptor drain, if I may, on the east side of the driveway that sort of funnels it all, and it just sort of spills out on the High Street at this point. That part's already existing, so that'll have to be addressed as part of this.
I have a
So-
question. Go ahead.
So, so there's a drainage structure at the intersection of Stewart Lane and another structure further north. The structure that's further north, does that, or is there piping between those, or does that go out the bank?
Don't know that yet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things we're gonna find out.
Okay.
Because ultimately, like you're probably getting at, you need a structure right at the base of that driveway.
Or you need to connect in
Connect in,
Uh,
cut
another
the
drainage.
structure right there.
Yeah.
Is there, what's the reason you haven't, or maybe you did consider and discarded the idea of getting rid of the shed and accessing it?
Still can. It could be. I mean, we haven't gone so far. We want to see how the grades work out with how the walls go. It's perfectly good shed if we don't have to take it apart, dismantle it or move it. There's no need really.
I suppose changing it could have an impact on some of the issues that Ms. Larrow raised.
Excuse the shed.
Having the driveway start further south and go up the hill differently, less far from the property line.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's really only going to be one radius that you have to work with. And it's once you get up, as David pointed out, the first few contours are a little steep. It does level, no, it's not level. It's less steep towards the middle of the driveway. That's ultimately where that driveway is going to have to break off. And again, this would all depend on, these are tax maps, these are overlays. The boundary lines will shift basically once we get the survey finalized.
And would you actually point out the boundary line of the subdivision?
Sure, it's a red line.
Yeah, well, we can't see it from here.
Okay.
So it's a northwest.
South, yeah,
Or northeast.
southeast and northwest oriented line, correct.
Is there, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Shirley Carlson, we're above off of Chipman Lake. I just have a question on the size of the structure that Virginia wants to build. My understanding, it sounds like you're going to do garage underneath, which will go into the hill, and then you're gonna build on top of that. 1 story, 2 stories, how big is the house above ground level?
I don't know exactly, but I'm guessing it wouldn't be any bigger than 1,200 square feet maximum.
But you don't know if it's gonna be 1 floor or 2.
I think I'd prefer it to be at least 1.5, like a half story upstairs, possibly 2. It just, you know, I haven't gotten to like the design of the house yet. Yeah, does that make a difference?
I just was curious as to what this house is gonna look like.
Yeah.
The visual impact of it from above, really in the summertime, when all the leaves are there won't be a visual impact.
Mm-hmm.
Once the leaves are down, which is half the year,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
there's a big impact on visual
Yeah.
aesthetics.
Yeah.
And just for clarification, whereabouts is your house now?
Chipman Heights,
Yep.
7, right.
So are you
in-
directly behind?
Directly behind the Laros.
The Laros. So you're up further?
We are directly behind the Laros on Chipman Heights.
No, correct. I'm not sure who.
The boundary line shown on that tax map seems to be this
Oh, there we go. So you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's your.
half,
Above them.
halfway.
Correct.
Above Laros.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Anything else from the public at this time? Anything else from the board?
I'm curious how far the chain link fence on Laro's property is from Miss Logan's boundary line.
Our understanding when we purchased the house was that the fence is built on the southern boundary line. I mean, it was in existence when we got it, but that
Okay.
it is literally on, and We've never found the stake that's supposed to be in the triangle on the southwest corner of the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
We know where the stake is in the back.
In the trees.
Yeah, we found that one, and we found the other two on this Logan. So we'll have an answer for you, Rick.
Okay.
With the survey, once that gets
Yep,
finalized.
okay.
I think, no, that's it.
Sure.
I think what confuses me about the drawing, and I mentioned this to Virginia when we were going over it, is that, like, the actual photograph that's underneath it, that's kind of just blurry.
Yeah.
It implies that the tree is quite a ways from our boundary line, which is not, if our understanding that fence was the southern border of our property, it's not far.
If I may, so these are tax map based, and we've set GPS control and brought in tax maps onto the property. So this is not a survey. Once we have the survey, this will change based on our survey results. With the boundary. When we have the pins, the deeds, we've confirmed a few other pins along High Street, south of Virginia Logan. So we kind of, when you're doing a boundary survey on one of these village lots, you kind of sometimes have to survey out frontage on a bunch of them. So it'll look a lot different, it'll look different than the tax map.
I have one question. So you're by now, if you weren't already, you're by now aware of the issues that will come up at the final. So I just want to ask you, the hammerhead that goes off to the left, to the north, could it potentially go to the south? I mean, in the design of the house? I know the house isn't designed yet. That's your closest
It could.
to the, yeah.
It could, David, it could.
That's possible.
That could go, that would allow more protection actually to the tree, and you're correct. If that did, that can change.
I mean, you're going to have, for the code, you're going to have some restrictions on what you can do up there, and, who knows, the board might put on additional, or, but there is one piece that's a horizontal infrastructure that might be able to adjust.
Change that. Once we get final sort of house placement and size and orientation, I mean, right now we have the ridge lines we're in that go south, and that could go east-west. This is still conceptual. We don't want to go too far with this.
Thank you.
Okay. We don't need a motion for this, do we?
Other than to determine, is it a major or minor? And
That's right, yes.
I think we've identified all
All the issues.
the issues.
Right.
or concerns.
Jason, you're clear on what everything? Okay. All right.
I move that we close the public hearing on this item, move on to the second item, and address this in deliberative session afterward.
Except this isn't a hearing.
Not a hearing.
It is not a hearing, so
Close this non-hearing.
You don't even need to go into deliberative session.
Okay, so the only thing we need to do is decide whether it's a minor or major subdivision.
Perhaps David can outline for the public what difference, if any, that makes in terms of final hearings.
the difference between a major and a minor is 2 publicly warned hearings for a major and only 1 publicly warned hearing for a minor.
Thank you.
And the deciding factor is, one of the key deciding factors between a major and a minor is whether you're extending the town infrastructure,
That's correct.
which we don't have the answer to that at this point.
Right.
Is
So
that-
let me ask the board, and maybe you know, Jason, but if there were a pipe between the two, if the catch basin goes at the bottom of the driveway, is that an infrastructure extension?
I wouldn't say that it's an extension, because you're tying into existing infrastructure. If you're not running, there's storm service up, if there's storm sewer already up the street, I would presume that would not constitute.
Existing pipe,
Right.
okay. So then even with the stormwater improvements, it would still be classified as a minor? If there is a pipe,
If there's a pipe there that you can connect to, if there isn't, and you have to connect to the lower drain,
then that is.
then that would be.
Do you want to base it on two people's opinion, or?
I think-
Can I ask a question for better understanding about that?
Sure.
I don't know, again, how I'm allowed to.
Yes.
So when we were looking to repave the driveway, because there's so much hydro pressure on the back end of our house, on the east side of our house, we talked with Dave, and then Dave sent us over to Public Works to talk to them. And their feeling was that if we wanted to create drainage from our property that needed to see daylight somewhere on High Street, we were gonna need to pay to install some sort of a new pipe from the base of our driveway down to that T intersection on Stewart Lane and High Street. And we honestly could not afford to do that. And so we changed our conversation with the town and with Public Works to simply repaving the driveway, allowing for a little bit of a swale that would direct the water on one side of the driveway, which is what we currently have. So I think I'm confused about all of that part of the conversation, because if fixing the drainage in our property was going to require that new piping from the base of that driveway down to the T intersection, I'm not clear how what is being proposed.
We just have to verify whether there's a pipe between those catch basins, or like they were one, the top one either spills over and dumps on neighboring properties, and the one at the bottom of Stewart Lane must be connected to the town infrastructure. So we have to confirm that. That's part of the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Jen?
I have one other thing, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. I don't usually share opinions, but this is a sketch plan, and I think that having an overall opinion on the project, like in general, even though we're not making any non-binding decisions tonight, you're not, I think is important for the applicant. So I'm not a DRB member, I'm a staff member. So I'm not the ultimate decision maker, they are. But I would be remiss not to say, as the town planner and as a staff member, that building a house on a steep slope like this is just not a very good idea. And we're talking a lot about aesthetic impacts, stormwater impacts, driveway grade, all those things is beating around the heart of the issue, which is that it's not smart to build on a steep slope like this. And I've got no one but myself to blame, because we should have zoning regulations that prohibit projects like this and prohibit construction on steep slopes for all those aforementioned reasons. So I just kind of wanted to be honest, even though I'm probably putting myself right under the bus, about kind of probably what we're all feeling right here, and let you know that as the applicant and the engineer, you're going to be under probably more pressure and more scrutiny than other applicants to prove to this board, like kind of beyond a doubt, that you're not causing impacts to other property owners, the right-of-way, all those things that are much more tenuous on this project than a typical project that's sited on a more stable slope.
Sure.
Okay.
We recognize those coming.
Yep.
Okay.
From the first meeting on the site, we knew the challenges.
Okay. So we still need a motion as
I
to.
think you've got a motion, I don't know that we got a second.
What's the motion?
Motion was just to close this
Well-
portion of the meeting.
Yeah, but we want to decide whether it's a major or minor.
I think it's the longer the discussion than we should have while everybody's waiting on the second hearing. That's why I suggested it, just to keep the evening flowing.
Well, my view is that we should rule that it's a major, just in case. Can we change that down the road?
I would say that we rule it as a minor, contingent upon there being infrastructure there. Because that's really the key. If there's infrastructure there already, which, Ms. Laro believes there isn't, based on her conversation with the town, that would automatically push it into it. It would trigger a major. But
Maybe Dave's point's well taken, just discuss it afterward, and,
Fine with me.
the minutes
And
reflect it.
And I don't want to speak fully for Virginia, but, and I'm in favor if you guys do decide to go to a major, to have one more hearing, if we do have something we need to present at preliminary, instead of getting all the way through final. I mean, I would be okay with that. It's one more meeting. I mean, you're not really in a hurry.
Right.
So if there is a step along the way that we have to get to, so if the board does decide that you want to go declare it a major, we have a lot to do to prove getting up there, making the turn, keeping the grades, protecting the tree, where the property lines are, all that sort of stuff, where if there's a pipe, infrastructure. There's a lot to prove to come in that if we do it as a preliminary, I mean, I'm okay with that, as long as you are.
Yeah.
Just so we don't get right to the end point where if there's something that comes out at the next meeting, we're not all fine.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, it seems like the, whether or not there's a pipe there makes a huge difference.
Yes.
So that seems like, if we could find that out right away.
And grading and protecting the slopes as Jen alluded to. I mean, it's something where if we came into a preliminary, we'd come in with a set of plans, but we wouldn't apply for the state water and wastewater permit yet for preliminary, because I don't wanna waste your money or spend your money and get a permit and an application to get to that point. So maybe that's one thing, if we did have an item that was sort of not a big deal in terms of the subdivision, because it's, you know, it's gonna get there by gravity, I guarantee it.
So if there was a preliminary hearing, you would cover the driveway issues for that hearing?
Correct.
Gary?
Yeah, so if there is a pipe there, what would need to be done?
If there's a drainage pipe between those two catch basins, they'd put a new structure in, have to design and drop in a catch basin.
Who would do that?
I mean, the responsibility of the applicant,
So,
as part of when the driveway is constructed. I mean, it's our job to.
well, that's infrastructure. If you gotta do something there, that's infrastructure.
But it's not extending a pipe by how your regulations read. But again, I'm okay with a preliminary hearing. Ultimately, that's.
Well, even before we have a preliminary hearing, I'd like to know if there's
We're gonna
pipe
find
there.
out.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, Gary,
So how do we proceed?
so do you want to make the motion that it's a major subdivision?
Sure.
Do we have a motion? Or did we
I don't know,
get that
David,
cleared up?
did
I
David?
withdraw my motion
I wasn't sure he ever finished the motion.
for the terminating the hearing that didn't exist.
Right, okay. So there's a motion to rule a major subdivision, and it's been seconded.
Who seconded it?
Jason, discussion on the motion?
So, yes, so procedurally, 2 hearings, but no additional different standard? That's what we're talking about?
Can I just, one additional thing that I just thought of, and just to expand a little bit on Jen's comments in regards to the steep slope in zoning. One thing that is sort of a plus, in my opinion, is this is a lot that is being created in town with town infrastructure, where it's not outside of town, so it does meet the zoning requirements, it does meet the regulations. I mean, I guess we can all recognize that there are challenging grades, there are challenging slopes. I think we do have sort of a plan to work with that if we can. We have to confirm that once we do, but it is a parcel that is part of the high-density district, and it's sort of infill, if you will.
Thank you. David, you have,
I just wanted to clarify what we're getting.
the standards are the same standards will be met for a minor as a major.
And there's actually some additional standards that it's more comprehensive, a major review.
Any other questions on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Jason, we noticed one thing. The back lot, the new lot, there's no front setback. So, right, it's actually 15. Yep. Yes, that helps you.
I don't know, these are extra. I don't think she needs to have these. Starting a library.
Our next application is a request by 29 Seminary Street LLC for conditional use approval for an assisted living facility for up to 6 adults with special needs located at 29 Seminary Street. The 29 Seminary Street LLC property is located in the high-density residential, parcel 025161. The following is the DRB oath for applicants, interested persons, and those who wish to participate in this hearing. If you are interested in participating, please take the oath at this time. If you do not, you will not be able to participate. Do you affirm that the evidence and information you are giving in this proceeding is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? Please raise your hand. At this time, I would ask the members of the board if any member has a conflict of interest regarding this application.
Unfortunately, I do, again,
Okay.
as my firm's working on
Okay,
the wastewater aspect of it, so.
okay, thank you, Jason. At this time, does any member wish to disclose any ex parte conversations concerning this case? Hearing none. Okay, if you'd like to introduce yourselves and give us an overview of the project?
Sure thing. My name is Andrea Murray.
I'm Kristen Brown.
We are two families, the Browns and the Murrays, who are joining forces to design a residential living situation for our young children, young adult children with special needs. In doing so, we hope to benefit not only our children, but a few others as well. For those of you who are parents, you may not understand our situation, but as parents of children with special needs, we want a meaningful transition for our children into their adult life, just as a neurotypical child would have, whether they go to college, start a job, whatever their adventures might be. We want our children to have friends and to participate in this community that they've spent a lot of time in and that they love. And I would also say we want to be our children's neighbors. Finally, we want to make sure that our children have a continuity of place and hopefully people when their parents are no longer around to take care of them. We have found in starting this conversation that we're not alone and there are many others in this community and in a lot of places who share the same vision. To address the 29 Seminary Street property a little bit, as we began to develop our vision and our plan, we had a few specific criteria for a property. And the number one criteria was that we wanted it to be in the walkable downtown of Middlebury. As most of young adults with special needs in the kind of who need 24-hour care or supervision, they don't drive. So being walkable is really important. We wanted them to have a beautiful home to live in. We wanted to be large enough, the property, to accommodate 2 households, and conducive and welcoming so that the broader community can also be invited in. And then we, of course, wanted to have enough property to have a garden. We found this great property, 29 Seminary Street on the corner of Seminary and High Street. We haven't gone too far from your last application. We're right down the street. And it's a big, beautiful yellow house there, and we've decided to call our organization Yellow House Community. Yellow House Community is based on the Camp Hill community model, which is founded by Rudolf Steiner, and you might be familiar with the Waldorf school curriculum. But the idea behind that is to celebrate everybody's unique strengths and abilities. In order to achieve what we're trying to do, we are pursuing TCR licensure. TCR is Therapeutic Community Residence. The Therapeutic Community Residence is slightly different than the typical residential model in Vermont for an adult with special needs. An adult with special needs can go to live with another family or an individual. You can have 2 individuals with special needs who are unrelated living in the same household. That's the limit. A TCR allows for up to 4 individuals to live in the same household together. And as part of pursuing this licensure, we need to come before all of you to make sure that our property is designated appropriately per the zoning. TCR requirements and our insurance company requirements have required some alterations to the property, for which we have permits from the Division of Fire Safety, the town, and also, have just spoken with the fire chief. Some of those, as you would imagine, those upgrades include things like handicapped accessibility. We've added a ramp, we've added some accessible bathrooms and made the ground floor of the home generally accessible. We've added life safety systems such as fire alarm, sprinkler, a new water service, which is what Jason was talking about. He's helped us with that allocation letter. There are no issues with water or sewer allocation. We've done some energy efficiency upgrades, some deferred maintenance, and we've expanded the parking from 5 spaces to 8 spaces. We're also about to, now that we've done all this work, do some landscaping to make it beautiful. And that construction should be done this week, and our neighbors have been very tolerant of a longer than hoped for summer construction process, and we're grateful for their tolerance. So what will daily life be like at this community? We don't know 100% yet what it will be like, but eventually there will be 2 households, each with a household head, and 3 residents with special needs. On the property, as you can see on the map, there's the main house, and then there's a 2-story carriage barn. So those would be the 2 dwelling units. We would expect additional staff persons to join the effort during the daytime, perhaps 2 or 3 people, to assist with daytime programming, community outreach efforts, job service, and other projects. As with any household, we would expect to have a get-together or a gathering once in a while, maybe once a month, but nothing outrageous or too noisy. This summer, we did an experiment. We had 6 weeks of summer programming where we invited 10 participants with special needs to come to the Yellow House, and this is an effort to get to know who are the people in our community who could benefit or who would be interested in a situation like the one we are creating. And we were overwhelmed and in a good way and surprised by the participation we had this summer. Likely this will continue for the short term into the fall and evolve into a transition program for these young adults to eventually become residents in the next few years. A few just sidebar notes. The house has 5 bedrooms. We have not changed that. The carriage house has a 3-bedroom apartment and an office. It has 2 tenants right now. Eventually, the carriage barn will also have 5 bedrooms. The sewer water allocation accounts for that. The traffic and parking, as I mentioned before, our residents likely will not drive. We have a van. There will likely be 2 cars, 1 for each household head, and the potential for 2 to 3 vehicles for daily staff people, should everybody drive. So that would be 7 to 8 spaces. We have technically 8 spaces, although yesterday over there I noticed in that row of 5 spaces there were actually 6 cars parked there. So it's a very generous 5 spaces. There is public transportation very close. Actor bus stops on Washington Street right by Shaw's, which is a block away, a very short block away. There's also on-street parking on a variety of streets surrounding. The property previously was used as a B&B, So I anticipate that, and it was approved as a conditional use for a bed and breakfast. So there would probably be less traffic, as that usually had one vehicle per bedroom. We are excited for many reasons. We're creating jobs in this community, which is pretty exciting to us. We've had several conversations with CSAC. They are supportive of what we are doing, have agreed to write a letter of recommendation for our licensure to the state. The building, I should also note, both buildings have been, had tenants in them, 3 tenants at a time. So I think that our impact here will be positive and also less significant than it has been in the past. So pursuant to Section 540 of the Middlebury zoning regulations, this property qualifies for conditional use as assisted living facility, and so we're asking for this approval tonight as a final, so that we can proceed with our TCR application.
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
Questions from the board?
We'll see.
Did you want to speak?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Not yet. We'll see if you have questions.
Yes, Ann.
Do you have authority for saying that a TCR is assisted living? Because the licenses are different.
They're 2 very different things, you're right. So a therapeutic community residence is really a designation through the state that allows us to increase the number of participants or residents who are unrelated to live together. It also allows us to be able to use Medicaid waiver funding for people who would live there. So it's not really related in any way to the zoning. But the TCR application requires us to have approval and demonstrate that there are no objections in your community to having this use in this area. I worked with Jen and Dave to find what the other option would be, a group home. From the state's perspective, we are not allowing any more group homes to be created in the state. So assisted living was the designation that most closely fit what we are trying to do here. For additional reference, 3 doors down on Seminary Street, there is a group home. It has, I think, capacity for up to 9 people. It's one of 2 group homes we have in Middlebury and one of 11 in the state, and they are being phased out. So I guess to answer your question more fully, we don't need authority to do that. I think they're 2 unrelated questions. Per my conversations with the state and with CSAC and with the your zoning staff here.
Well, I just wanted to clarify that because that was one of the first thoughts that I had when I read your application. You say this is assisted living, and I'm thinking, okay, well, show me why.
Right, so there would be people living here who have disabilities who require 24-hour supervision. And so they would live here side by side with people of normal ability who will assist them in their daily tasks and make sure that they are out of harm's way, not vulnerable, and well taken care of. And hopefully have joyous, wonderful, lovely lives.
Any comments? Questions?
Are there operational or infrastructural changes from the B&B use to the proposed use, and like things like trash management, or are they more at the scale of a residential home?
They're really a scale of a residential type operation. I think that our participants will probably be very much held to operating their own household and helping with things like trash and mowing the lawn and gardening and that sort of thing.
I didn't mean the quality. I was actually asking about sort of physical location. If there's when we review a business, we would ask where the dumpster's gonna
Oh, where
be.
the dumpster's gonna be, I get it, okay, yeah, so,
I just tried to make it as complicated as possible.
thank you.
Keep you on your toes.
Right here is, this is the main house, and right here, and the cutoff is, this is Seminary Street here, and this is High Street.
Yep.
And this is the parking area, and we created handicap access this way. This is the carriage barn right now, and we haven't done any work to that. And right now, the garbage is stored inside, right inside the garage door. And I think it will stay there for the time being. When we get to a point where we can renovate the carriage barn, having a designated place for the trash that sort of is incorporated into that design will occur at that time. So, but I don't imagine there like being bins out here overflowing, and it would be purposefully designed.
Okay.
Other questions at this time?
Yeah, on parking and traffic, the staff tells us that you've had some extended conversations about clients possibly not living on site.
Well, right now, because it's summer, as I described, we have had some people who don't live there yet on site, and
This is after you get going.
yes, I imagine that will happen for the first few, I don't know, months or even a year as we start to figure out who are the people who will be living here, and we transition those people gently into a new living situation. So yes, and I would say like any other household, once we have established, we would invite friends over once in a while, but I don't see it as operating as a business on a regular basis for the long term in that capacity. We're not creating an adult daycare situation or that sort of thing.
Okay, well, you understand if you do change it, you're gonna have to come back to us.
Yes, sir.
We understand.
But in the transition period over the next year or so, we would imagine there being individuals there who aren't living there 100% of the time, because we will be gradually transitioning into the residential situation.
But they won't be in receipt of the sort of programming, any sort of educational program. I mean, you'll be dealing with the people when they're at the house, but they will be the people who ultimately may end up living there.
Yes, and as part of that transition, there will be programming.
Well, yes, but what do I mean?
I think what we're trying to get at is this gonna be a school where people
No.
come, 4 or 5 people come daily? You're gonna have to be picked up and dropped off?
No, the intention, the intent is for it to be a residence, just like I might have moved my family in. We're
Right.
trying to build a household where our adult children will live. They will go live there, and they will go out into the community to their jobs. And they will work together in the household, you know, doing the things that they do to serve the community. Maybe like my husband and I would, maybe occasionally they'll say, we're gonna have a dinner party and have friends over, but we are not creating a school or a business. I think what Andrea is pointing out is that in the interim, we have been trying to, our children will be residents. We are trying to identify and work with other families who also would want to be part of it. And that is who may be coming in the interim, but not living there.
How many families are we talking about? Additional families?
We have room for 6 participants total in both dwelling units. So
4 other families?
this summer in our little experiment, we've had 6 at a time.
Yeah.
So that's been the maximum, and
Yeah.
or fewer. And I I want to just, full disclosure is that we don't know what our timeline is. It could be in 6 months where we have people here, and it could be in 2 years.
Yeah.
But we do want people to come on a daily basis as we're trying to figure out who the right fit are, who really wants to live here.
Okay, would it be appropriate for us to put a limit on the number of participants?
The state does it already,
That's what the state
so the
does.
state
That's
limits
what
it
the
at 4
TCR
per dwelling unit, so.
That's what the state.
This is for the what is
For
it?
the TCR, the therapeutic community residence, so you could, but it's already limited.
Well, I'm thinking more of parking and traffic
Yeah,
in and out.
I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's funny because we were thinking about, well, gosh, when this was a B&B and every room was filled, 8 bedrooms filled, and they had 8 cars, we were like, where did everybody park, including the people who were operating the B&B? And so
Were they ever filled?
I would imagine it, college, but the point is that we've expanded our parking. We anticipate that we will have at the maximum 7 vehicles, 7 to 8, and we have 8 to 9 spaces. And I don't think we're gonna have an excess of traffic. It would be, I mean, imagine if the house were filled with teenage kids, so.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hospitality is full 12 days of the year. Hospitality outfits.
Yep.
That's it.
Part of your parking includes the 3 on-street parking, is that?
We have these, you can't see it here on the.
Yeah, the 3 off
There are
seminary.
there are 3 spots here that have
Okay.
been here, for I don't know how long, and then there's this
Okay.
driveway here that we've expanded,
Yeah.
to have 5 or 6, depending on how you
Thank you.
park. And I should also add, there's a garage right now too, so a vehicle could also be in the garage.
Any changing to the exterior lighting at this time?
Yes, we have actually improved the exterior lighting, and I gave 2 fixtures in the application, because we weren't sure we could get, which one we could get, and I think I printed, oh dear. The one we picked is a full cutoff downlight. It's,
Is it this one here?
it's that one, yes.
Yeah.
And they are only on the porch, so they're under the porch roof anyway. They're an LED, very efficient light fixture, and it's a full cutoff downlight.
Other questions from the board at this time? Any comments from the staff at this time? Questions?
I had a
Comments?
question.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you just help me so I can write it down? What's in the barn, what's in the house in terms of bedrooms, kitchen, dining space?
Sure, so right now in the house, there are 5 bedrooms and a small office, and a kitchen, living, dining area, and a small den.
And you're gonna keep it that way?
And we're gonna keep it that way.
Uh-huh.
And then in the barn, currently there are 3 bedrooms, an office, a garage, and a utility space. And eventually, our vision is to put 5 bedrooms in there and a smaller kitchen living space, as we would imagine people would probably all go to the main house for major meals, the main meal of the day. That project, we don't know how far out that is. It will depend on, the momentum that builds and the participation.
So I agree then with what you inferred, that that's 2 dwelling units, one in the barn, one in the house.
Yes.
Yep.
So currently, there's 3 bedrooms in the barn.
There's a 3-bedroom apartment on the second floor.
On the second floor. There's no living space now on the ground floor in the barn.
Just an office and a bathroom, a professional office.
Okay.
There's an acupuncturist there.
Okay, and you're hoping to expand that particular structure by 2 bedrooms?
Yeah, I don't think we would expand the footprint at all,
Well-
but we would renovate it on
Yes.
the interior,
Okay.
yes.
All right, so it's not 5 plus 2 more, it's the 3 that are existing and then 2 more maybe in the future?
Yes.
Okay.
And the calculations that were done for the water and sewer are based on that expansion.
Andrea, the contemplated renovation in the future,
Yes.
are you counting on keeping that garage space?
No. Well, we don't know yet, but I don't think so. If anything, we might put a little carport on over some of the parking that's adjacent to the barn, but no, we probably would not.
Anything else from staff at this point? Okay, I'll open it up to the public. If you would like to speak, if you would give us your name and then ask your questions or comments.
I'm Rita. I'm Rita Monroe. We live kitty corner from.
Your last name,
Me too.
your last name, please.
Monroe, MUNRO. And yeah, I'm a social worker. I'm really excited about many of the things that you're proposing about, vulnerable folks in our community receiving really good care. I do have a question about, there was a statement in the Addison interview or about this day programming, and I think whether that was but what I'm hearing is that if there were any kind of programming, you would be limited by the therapeutic residence to 8. So if there was an event that you would use Medicaid vouchers for or something like that, it would be limited to, there would never maybe be more than 8 people participating in a day activity at a time. That's yes.
Okay. But just like any house, we might have a party sometime and there could be more people there, but I don't see that as being, a few times a year kind of thing, just like you might at your house have a party, but no.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Sorry, David Monroe, also kitty corner. Just one concern, I guess, about parking. So there's not a lot of, there's no street parking in fact in that area. The only street parking is on High between Seminary and Washington, which is often quite busy. And it sounds like, in terms of vehicles, there'll be 2 staff members, residential staff members, up to 3 during the day, the van. And so you don't have, a lot of excess capacity there for when we get these bigger get-togethers. I'm just concerned about the impact that's going to have on parking in the area.
Yeah, so there is parking on High Street between Seminary and Washington Street, and then there's quite a bit of parking along Washington Street. So between the LaBerge Insurance and kind of all the way up past Green Peppers, and so there is some parking there, street parking. I don't know, having just worked on the co-op and the expansion of the co-op and doing the parking analysis in the area, somehow people make it work. I don't know how, but I'm not anticipating huge gatherings, and if we needed to, we could ask in that case, we could ask our staff and park our own vehicles far away so that we could try and keep vehicles off the street or people's lawn or something.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Catherine Brown. I'm the daughter of Kristen. I just wanted to speak to your questions about traffic because I was, for a few weeks this summer, responsible for dropping off my sister to and from this day programming. To paint a picture of how this goes, they all get into a Sprinter van with their stuff and they go do activities all day, whether that's volunteering, whether that's going to a state park. So they're operating essentially as a 1-vehicle team during the day. And the traffic that's coming in and out for day programming, which eventually that's not what this would look like, but let's say at the highest volume traffic version of this you can imagine, which was this summer, it was maybe 3 or 4 cars dropping off their children in the morning and picking them up. in the afternoon. So to the extent that you're envisioning a comparison between a fully staffed hotel in, you know, high season of homecoming and what have you versus this, it's almost an entirely different, it's sort of apples and oranges. So I just thought I would offer, on a daily basis, it would not be the volume of traffic that you would get if you were running a B&B where every single bedroom has a couple with a car.
I was thinking more of elderly services, really. Somebody mentioned a hotel or hospitality, so I thought I'd stick that in there, but I was thinking more of adult daycare and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Bob Murray, 11 High Street. We're right across the street from. And my comment is just about the High Street parking that's been put in. I'm sure you guys don't realize this, but that parking lot is up a little bit.
Yep.
And it's hard to believe now, but in the winter when all the leaves are gone, we actually get headlights from that parking lot in our living room window, and not from you guys, but from previous tenants, from people kind of warming up their cars in the parking lot and stuff like that.
The one in front of the one in front of the carriage house.
Yeah,
Okay.
it just comes right across.
Where is your property?
We're behind the hedge on High Street.
Okay.
We're right across the street from it.
On the corner.
You're over over here?
No.
That's up here.
Right over here.
Anyway, you're on Seminary Street. We're on
Our address is High Street, but our lot fronts Seminary Street in Park.
Oh, okay. Got it. Well, that's a really good thing because we are about to do some landscaping in here. Maybe we should consider some evergreen types of things there to help.
That might be a really good idea.
Help block that. Although I will say,
I mean, I know 4 or 5 o'clock in December it's dark, but I don't see us doing a lot of evening kinds of things.
Right, but even like staff people, staff people kind of automatically turn on their cars in the parking lot, the lights come on, those kinds of things. I would like you to be aware.
Yeah, if you wanted to come over at some point in the next day or two when our landscaper's there and we could find the spots where it really is impactful, we'd be...
It's going to be the whole line of...
The whole thing.
There's lights, the lights would come from.
And I don't know if it makes a difference. Our intention is not to have shift workers either. So the people who would be living there, so they would be coming home at the end of the day as well and turning off their cars. It would not, we don't anticipate having someone leave at 11 and starting their car up and leaving and having someone else roll in.
But I'd be happy to think about it as we start our landscaping.
But it'd be great to know as we're doing that, yeah.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
So if there are like small things that come up, and then this is maybe not like a planning, but would contacting Elise as the executive director or you as owners, like what kind of is the best way for the surrounding neighbors to participate or be,
Well, Elise will be there every day and would love to have you come and speak with her, but I would say you can always contact me.
Okay.
Our hope is that our children will be great neighbors.
Yeah.
That's what we would hope. We would expect that of them, and we want to work hard to do that.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Stacy Stone. My oldest daughter has special needs, and we were fortunate enough to hear about the Yellow House. I've lived in Addison County my entire life, as has been our parents. I mean, we really value the community here, and I think that I'm very thankful that the Browns and Murrays are addressing a need that there is in this community. But I do respect, as neighbors, I think, wow, if I lived there and this was coming into my neighborhood, what would I think? And I'd say, first of all, if I was getting new neighbors, I would hope that they weren't into wild parties at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can cross that off your list. And that could easily happen if that house had been bought by someone else, and they were renters, or, you know, they rented it out, or even a B&B, you know, a lot of times people come into town, they're there for the weekend and they just want to have fun. So that would be one of my concerns, and I was thinking, maybe they can cross that one off the list. Another one would be that how well my neighbors maintain their property. And I think if having lived right there, you can see how, I mean, it was a beautiful property to start with, and these guys definitely have embraced that, and it's pretty obvious the amount of resources they're putting into it, that how it looks and is presented is important. So that was another thing that I think is important as being, when you're in close quarters with other people. And then probably another, let's see, I had another one. I think another important thing is neighbors that are neighborly. You know, you guys might have a family function and have a lot of people one day, and have a lot of cars. And so maybe that means someone has to drive around a car that day, but it's not like an everyday thing. You know, it's just a neighborly thing of a little give and take. And referring to Gary's comment about the capacity of the bed and breakfast maybe only being full capacity, what was it, 12% or something he said?
12 days a year.
12 days a year. But even so, if it had been full capacity 365 days a year, it was approved for that reason. So I believe, I mean, that would be my guess. But I feel in the short time that I've gotten to know the Browns and the Murrays, I hope that I know you don't know me, but I think that if I were to have them as neighbors, I would feel very fortunate, because I feel like they're very respectful. I mean, they even have community in the name of their business. I don't know if you would call it a business, but it's the Yellow House community, and they're extremely community oriented. Our daughter has been there this summer, and that's one of the things that I really loved about it is how much they bring to the community of Middlebury. As far as the programming went, one important thing that they did every single day was something for the community, whether it was making lunches for the homeless, making, I'm trying to remember some of the other things, but every day was part of random acts of kindness, and what better neighbors to have than that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
I have a question. Will the operator of the property continue to be an LLC or a 501c3, or is that to be determined? Or?
Right now, we are an LLC. We've been introduced to this wonderful word or term called inurement, which basically means that if you want to become a 501c, you have to demonstrate that it's not just a self-serving tax shelter. So we need.
That's what we were all thinking. Anyway.
I knew it was. So we're really, we need more people to be involved and living there than just our own 2 children. So ideally, we would eventually become a 501c3, but we are not right at the moment for Yellow House.
Any other questions?
How many people do you need to be a 501c3?
There's no black and white. Our attorneys have.
What I'm getting at here is there's a lot of round and round about how many people we're going to have there. Yeah. And then you spring something like this on us. You said, oh, well, we're going to have a lot more people to be a 501c3, and we are pursuing the 501c3 status.
They don't need to come or live at the house.
No.
It's just how many people are you touching in the community, and
if it were just the 2 of our kids, it's one thing. If we have 6 people living there, it demonstrates that it's for more than just our children.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have to demonstrate that before.
But do they have a number?
No, they don't. Our attorneys have said, different numbers from, more than 50% to 80%. So, but they,
Sure.
advised us to not do it just yet until we had our residents.
But to the point of view of the DRB and planning, we have the number. Right? We know the number, which is on their state permit as a TRC and in our zoning on dwelling units.
Right. The other thing is, are we in agreement that we can use this classification?
I think it's something that should be discussed so we know exactly what we're getting into.
I do too.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? Is there a motion?
I just want to mention that there's been a lot of discussion about parking. I think as 2 residential units, it probably only needs 4 parking spaces, and the board, nor should the applicant, rely on any on-street parking. You know,
Because
because it's not allowed, we can't, the board can't waive off-site, on-site parking and grant on-street parking in the high-density district. Is that, I think that's right, I said that right.
yeah, we were just reading it over. You can do it in the VRC, in the Downtown Improvement District, which is like the co-op, but not here, just because of where the line is drawn.
Section 760 of the zoning says that we're required to have 2 parking spots per dwelling unit, or 4 in
That's
total.
the first thing he said.
That's what he
Yeah,
said.
and so we've doubled that, and we think
Right,
that will
right.
more
I
than
just
meet
don't
our
want-
need.
Well, but
You
I just
haven't
don't
doubled
want, yeah, you've only got,
The 5 or 6 that are on site.
right, because
You
the
can't
other
count
3
the
are
3 on the
actually
street.
on street, and that's within the town right of way, and so
Unless they're
they're
in the
not
deed.
on-site parking technically. You meet it, so I just don't want
They
the.
were in the deed. I mean, I think they've probably been there for eons.
Okay, then let's take it, I just want to make it clear that the reference to parking on Washington Street and that kind of stuff is available to you, and the board can't waive the parking requirements and allow you to park over there. You have a gathering, I guess for, an evening affair, I mean, that's one thing, but I don't think the board can grant you that.
And I don't think we
Parking
need it.
on
Yeah.
street.
I see, understood.
We're not allocating it or approving based on.
Right.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
I move we close the hearing and go into deliberative session.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
You can't close.
Further discussion on the motion?
I don't think it makes any difference.
Is there any? No.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. So we will go into deliberative session now,
Okay.
and, which means everybody must leave the room except staff and the video recorder, or maybe
She's got to go to.
she's gotta go too. And then we'll let you know, we'll have the results for you tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we thought you were purchasing those spaces.
We could, if you want us to.
I don't think you can in that district, that
Oh,
That's
I
the
mean,
problem.
I was under the impression, but I should go look at it more carefully, that those were in the deed and they've been there for eons.
That'd be neat to know.
Regardless, I think we have enough parking on our property to
That was my point.
satisfy the zoning
Agreed.
requirements, so.
I
Okay,
move we come out of deliberative session.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. We are out of deliberative session. Do we just make an announcement of what we've decided?
I'd make the motion that's in the packet.
I'll make it.
Okay.
I move that the Middlebury Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of August 12th, 2019, approve this conditional use for an assisted living facility for adults with special needs as presented in the application by Andrea doing business as 29 70th Street LLC, located at that address, parcel number 025.161.000, subject to conditions outlined by the DRB which staff will append to this decision.
Second to that motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Other business. Jason?
That's why he hung around. He's got other business.
Number one, on-street parking discussion. Ann?
I have no idea what the point is.
How do you feel about it?
Jen can probably add to this, consider.
I think we should have height limits at the
Yeah, I was gonna
entrance
interrupt
to
you
the
anyway.
co-op.
was
So
at home.
pickups can't park there, so you can see where you're coming in and out. Sorry,
Okay,
carry on.
I alluded to it a little bit earlier, this deal of waiving off-street parking in favor of on-street parking. And we've done it the DRB has done it over the years quite liberally in the CBD district, the Central Business District, the VRC district, and the Downtown Business Improvement District, Downtown Improvement District. So our concern is we keep selling these things. And I guess the discussion is, and I don't know that we need to end it tonight, but we'd like to open up. We're starting to be concerned about trying to figure out how many parking spaces have been sold over the years, how many times they've been sold over. And if you think it's a problem, whether we need to be doing something about it, those kind of things, right? Isn't
Yeah,
that-
you know, what prompts that sort of query is, what if we get uses that want to come into downtown that are really high impact in terms of their parking usage? Is there potentially a use that we don't want to see in downtown because of all the spaces it uses versus what it gives back? And then I know the EDI project, I think the developers went away thinking at the end that maybe they wouldn't be able to buy all the parking they needed to make up for that project, and maybe that was true and maybe that wasn't. I'm glad the decision never came to us because we've got no metric for deciding how much is enough.
Is that the thing by the river?
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a big mixed-use building with some underground parking, but not enough to cover all the uses they were gonna stick in there.
I mean, to expand upon it, Star Mill, we've got an application that's gonna come before you as an exempt application very shortly. Maybe tomorrow, it's for a doctor's office down here in the mill. Now, my research shows that we've sold 57 parking spaces. The Star Mill has no parking whatsoever on site. We've sold 57 parking spaces over the years for that property, and now I'm suggesting that we sell possibly another 4 more because of the metric with our doctor's office and requiring 16 parking spaces and whatever. I mean, I don't know. I mean, first of all, why anybody would want to cite a doctor's office down there is beyond me. And we've had that conversation, but they can't find spot in
What
town.
kind of a doctor?
General practitioner. One of these concierge doctors,
Okay,
the
David,
high-end ones.
David, explain to me, if we sold 57 parking places for that one building, what happened to them?
How many of those businesses are still there?
Oh, they come and go all the time.
I know, but
Yeah, they do come.
Right, but if the businesses there only use 15, the fact that we've sold 57 would be irrelevant.
You didn't sell them to the building, you sold them to the occupants.
Over
To
time.
the use.
Over
to
time.
you, so why wouldn't those sales don't follow the use?
Well, they do, okay, where we can track them. And we give credit. I think we give credit. For instance, this doctor's office, I calculated out, based on the formula that they used, the DRB, or the Planning Commission used in 1988, I calculated that there's 12 parking spaces that was dedicated to this space. Our regulations requires 16 because it's 2 practitioners. So I'm suggesting that we make them buy 4 parking spaces. But I mean, at what point does,
And then I guess the other aspect of that is, there's no doubt, and Brent brought up when we did the Old Stone Mill, that our parking calculation is more of a suburban calculation, and it's
Yes.
giving us more parking than we need. So that's part of your answer there, is that
Okay.
they maybe didn't need 56 spaces, maybe they only needed 15, but, and we can change that in the zoning, maybe somehow by recalibrating our parking calculation, but it still feels just a little suspicious that, I don't know, that.
We keep selling spaces and we may not have them.
Yeah, and that according to the language, like, you're only supposed to be granting this waiver if you find that adequate public parking is existing or planned nearby, and I just don't know how you decide what's adequate.
A good example of that is Hannaford Shopping Center, when it was first built. The required parking came all that way out to Route 7, which included the National Bank, McDonald's, the mobile station, and the car wash. That was all parking required for that building at that time. And look what we have there now. And there's still plenty of parking there for that whole development, most of the time.
Does anyone know if the ITE standards give us like a more reasonable calculation
Now?
of downtown parking? I mean,
I don't.
that could be the metric that you use to decide if there's any left.
ITE?
Right, Institute of Traffic Engineers.
Yeah.
Isn't this a planning commission decision? Would it?
No, see, I'm even sorry that I brought up that maybe the zoning isn't the best, because now we're all gonna be like, yep, so change the zoning, not our problem, but like, honestly, like, that's only one piece, like, the zoning could be better, I'm gonna admit that right off
The
the bat.
review standard that we need to.
But,
have
I
the
mean,
discussion.
how are you making this finding over and over and over that parking is adequate? You got nothing to go on, do you need a list from us of how many spaces have been sold in that neighborhood in the last couple years?
But if
Do you want the ITE trip generation kind of calculation that gives you like a different calculation of parking? Do you want me to use like Burlington's downtown parking standards? Ours don't, do you know what I mean? This is just something we need to think about.
But if we use specific standards like that, then we'll end up turning away businesses.
I don't know what you're saying.
I guess I'm saying that if a business wants to locate in a place where there isn't enough parking and we sell spaces, if people aren't willing to walk from a space they can find, that business will go out of business. Like it's up to them to figure out how they're going to accommodate their customers, patients, whatever they are.
Yeah, I guess I don't even think that way because I'm a zoning administrator, so.
Yeah.
So I actually believe in these rules, and I think that we should be administering them like with some sort of like concept of whether or not it's working, rather than, like you're suggesting that we just leave it to the market to like figure it out.
Well, I don't really want us to be in the position of counting spaces and saying, sorry, we've already sold all the potential spaces in town, so you business can't come to town.
What do we do with the money?
I think
that
we are in that, we are in that situation. We're reviewing the use on, we would review their impact. We might not, it might not be the count itself that does it, but, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I'm curious, so we're selling these parking spaces. Where does that money go? Just in the general fund, or is it earmarked for
Parking improvements.
parking improvements in the
Mhm.
future?
Yeah.
Parking garage.
And do we have a kitty to spend?
Yeah, I'm not clear exactly how much is in that kitty, but
I think we talked about it once before and we decided it wasn't going to be anywhere near enough for a parking garage.
well, that's true.
but if we went back to the 80s,
Yeah, like that Star Mill decision specifically stated that the funds would be used to help develop the parking lot down in the alley, Mill Street.
Yeah.
I
There's
think the
plenty
day
of
is,
parking down there.
I think the day may come where you don't want to approve a use in downtown based on the fact that it's just blowing out your parking. And you can't reliably rely on your parking calculations if you don't have some sort of, if you're willing to always sell them all the extra spots that they need. Like, you could have like a BJ's Wholesale Club, like, located behind here, you know what I mean? You'd be like, no, like, that's wrong, but like, you know, unless we have some way of proving that we're maxing out in terms of how many spots we can sell them at a certain point, like, it just kind of leaves you.
Yeah.
I think that like a good case for thinking about it might be like something that turns into an assembly use at certain times. Like I had this question about the church, the addition on the church, on Congo Church. Like, it's great that it sits there most of the time, but one wonders when X number of people come to downtown, how will they disperse? I think that's a very legitimate thing for us to
Were
think
you there?
about.
That was one of my first DRB meetings.
Yeah.
When I was too mean to Pete DeGraff, and Rick told me to be nice.
But if you want to look at it that way, then, you know, the improvements to the fire station are a real issue, because if they're doing an open house, you know, you know, those off assemblies that aren't on a regular basis are very difficult to deal with. I know this isn't a very popular stance, but I'm in Middlebury on a very regular basis, and I have never not gone to a business or a building because I couldn't find parking.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, that is, you know,
Right.
and I tell a story that, you know, when the old municipal building was there and it was voting day, and I had to move a trailer from one end of town to the other, and I'm like, well, you know, I guess I'll have to double back. I was able to take up 2 parking spaces with that truck and trailer and go in and vote, adjacent to the municipal building. You know, so there is, you know, on a day when people were voting. So, like I said, I've always been able to, it may not be the exact spot I'm looking for, but, you know, and I hear where you're coming from, that, you know, you're selling out this capacity. And I could see how there would be situations, you know, where, you know, a business would be, you know, a regular assembly point that could cause problems with parking, but, you know, a lot of it also comes to timing, you know.
I think I understand about having numbers so that what we do makes some sense, but all the streets in the residential districts that can have cars parked on them, you know, if all of Shaw's was full and all the co-op was full and all the parking spaces were full and the Middlebury Inn lot was full, whether with people staying there or people parking there, if everywhere like that was full and parking was spilling onto the residential streets where it seems to be allowed, but there's very little of it, then that would be an issue, but we're not there yet.
What if the downtown master plan that we do this fall calls for converting the Ben Franklin's to a boutique hotel? And they convert every floor of that to hotel space and decide, as developers, you know what, it's not convenient for us to create any sort of like ground floor parking. We're not going to do it. But send us the bill for that on-street parking. It's only $250 a space, whatever. And they decide to just pay us off for it. Like, we're kind of like in a lurch about that. So I'm just trying to anticipate in advance what we do about this scenario.
Well, I think while I've been on the board, paying us off has been because we've thought about what's available around where each of these businesses is, and we've concluded that yes, they might need 8 spaces and they've only got 6, but the chances are they're never going to need 8 all at once, and I think we've weighed that each time.
I remember it was you, actually, that asked on the Old Stone Mill, how do we know that there's enough spaces in this lot to sell it? I remember you.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And then
But that's, yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking about selling spaces in a particular place.
So how many safe spaces have we sold in the Old Stone Mill in the last year? You sold
20 plus 22 plus there'll be another 4, so like 26 that I can think of right off the bat.
What's the capacity of that
It's somewhere between 55 and 60, I counted it.
The hotel situation you posited, they don't have a right to buy the spaces.
Right, they would have to ask you for a parking fee waiver.
And we would have to say whatever we thought at the time.
So the fact that we've sold a parking
I'd
waiver,
love to come back to that in 1 second.
Okay.
well, you wanna do it now? That's fine.
Sure, don't forget your thought though. Okay. So, yeah, they have no right to just require those spaces from us. We would have to give them a parking fee waiver. And if you decide, like, we're not gonna give that waiver, or we're only gonna give half the spaces you're asking for, I just think you need to have substantiation, because a developer like that's gonna take you to e-court, and like, you'll have no way of,
Yeah,
that's all.
I see, yeah.
So if we sell whatever it is, and they need 10 waivers, and we sell these 10, and then you change businesses or uses, and they come in and they need 12 spaces, so you only have to sell them 2, right?
If I can substantiate that, yes.
Well, but the case it's the same square foot, or the same business, floor span.
Well, if it's the same use, then there'd be no change in
No,
parking.
okay, different use, but it's the same exact footprint.
Yeah.
Does the second customer get credit for the 10 that you've already sold to the previous?
That's what, in my tenure
Okay.
here, yes.
Okay,
If
We
you
try
can
to-
find,
if
if
we
you can
can
find
s-
documentation.
If we can support it, yes.
okay.
So what about the business, let's say you sell them 10 spaces, they decide to move on to Virgin's or something, so they have this space available, but the next business comes in and only needs 6. So now you put 4 back into sort of
No, I think they, to the best of our ability, will carry that 10 forward.
Okay. Well, there
even
should-
though they don't need it.
Well,
I'm not
and
sure why
so,
you would do that.
Well, but it's to the property, so.
So you said the total for the mill over the years was what?
I'm just saying recently, it's like 26 spaces.
But it's to the property based upon the business that's in there at the time. So if that business left and the next business was required to have fewer spaces,
Just to be clear, it's the use, not the business, right?
Right, yes.
New dentist comes in, right, still
Yeah.
same,
Yeah.
unless the calcs have changed. Well, but then there's no trigger to check, right?
that's why I was questioning the spaces that were sold, how many are still in there? Because I can't see why it would go with the building.
So that's one way to manage this. We could create like a huge kitty. You know, it makes me think of like the wastewater treatment plant, actually, as we're talking through it. Like, Public Works is always saying, yeah, you can have allocation of this many gallons per day. Sure, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. But they must have some idea in their mind of how many total gallons per day they can take at the plant, right? So that they
Oh, they
know
got
when
that.
they're reaching
Oh, yeah.
capacity.
Compare it against the permitted value.
So what you're saying, David has to come up with an idea of how much parking.
David needs an intern next summer who can go through, like, maybe we just come up with a kitty of like, in downtown, we think that there's 800 spaces, like done, like no more than that. Or even do it by neighborhood or something.
I think it'd be a great asset to have just for informational, and while you did that, I think you should interrupt Gary as often as he's polite and raises his hand.
Oh, sorry, Gary.
No, you didn't.
While you
I
do
raised
that,
it while you were
I would love to see a comparison of IT and current standards on some business or two that we know. Like
Yeah.
what the co-op answer for IT and for the zoning would be, or pick a couple things that we all use and know. And tell us if there's a better standard we should be working from.
That's just gonna tell you how far out of whack the zoning is. So,
Well,
so you're right, that's a
you
planning
go from there.
commission.
That's right. Then
But we could then have, we could talk to the planning commission, you could. If IT is your recommendation.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you looked at Burlington stuff? There's some businesses up there that have no parking. Main
Yeah.
Street Landing's one of them.
Yeah, I looked at the Burlington regs, and like, there's a certain part of that downtown core where no parking is ever required to be provided. Yeah.
Seems like that might be a city that has publicly financed decks or something.
Decks?
Right.
Parking decks.
Yeah, yeah, one top of the other.
We'll get right on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, it seems like there's two issues. What standard the zoning, sets forth versus what the industry standard is. But that's separate from the conversation about how we handle it, when, how we allocate it and how we manage that limited resource, which is parking. So you can change how you allocate it all you want, by changing zoning, but you still have that underlying issue of
We need a
how
parking inventory.
Yeah, how you, how many you can sell. There was a parking study that was done. It should speak to that. Does it not?
It does.
Didn't we have a parking study? Can you use some of that information to?
Yeah, but I mean, the parking study is going to give us the actual physical number of spaces. Now we've got this like theoretical number of like the number of spaces in the kitty, right? Like based on like how much we think all the uses are going to use. I think that's different than the actual
No, right.
physical inventory.
That study didn't address that? That was strictly a count?
Yeah, like it counted the number of on-street spaces and the number of spaces in the lots. But I'm thinking we need to probably, and this is like almost impossible, what I'm suggesting, but like actually inventory the number of spaces we've sold and like come up with a total number of what we have for sale. Is the number that we have for sale the same as the number that's actually on the street? Like probably not.
I doubt it.
Like let's say we have
We've sold
60
them 3 or
spaces in
4
this
times.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
We can sell a lot more than 60 spaces in that neighborhood. We can
I would hope so.
right.
It'd be a great intern project.
Yeah, it would.
The intern almost ought to see what each business is and see how many spaces are required for that business, so that the issue you have of putting the spaces with the building wouldn't necessarily make it look as bad as it seems to now.
Dave recommended that earlier, because our intern this summer is counting, like, making a list of businesses and like what those uses are for those businesses and the square footages, so that we could use that information to
We might be
do
able to get some
calculations.
calculations out of that.
Yeah, and maybe that is pretty close to our total kitty number, I don't know.
It would be good to know, but it's a heck of a lot of work.
Well, this is good to think through this. Sorry I talked so much.
No,
Okay,
move on.
move on. DRB rules of procedure, report, discussion.
Okay, so all that I want to do is update you. At a recent hearing here a few months ago, we were dealing with a situation where the applicant didn't appear, okay? And you folks asked the question, or we're wrestling with it, how do you ask him questions if he's not here? And I posed that question after a review of the DRB rules of procedure to Garrett Baxter at the League of Cities and Towns. His comment was, I can't believe that you as a DRB, you grant them the ability to, recess and come back if they can. But the fact is, you need the applicant here, or somebody that can speak on their behalf. And I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I don't know why we didn't catch it before. There's an act under meetings, section 4, letter F, failure to appear. If an applicant fails to appear for a scheduled hearing, such hearing may be rescheduled for next available meeting. If the applicant fails to appear for a rescheduled hearing, the board shall have the authority to deny such application or appeal. So the reality is we have that.
Except that isn't there also a rule that says an applicant can be represented by someone else?
But they still need to be able to
testify.
Well,
that needs
and that's
to
kind of
be-
where Garrett was
And
going.
that's not,
Well,
and that's not clear from the rules we have now, which is why he could sit there and say, I'm representing him, but,
Yes.
I'm not going to be sworn.
well, I think, why can't we make that a rule? If somebody has sent somebody here to be their legal representative, we can swear that person in, and that person can testify or not testify.
Well, there has to be someone representing the applicant who's able to testify.
So with him he didn't want to be sworn in, didn't really want to testify, then we could have just denied
Yeah.
the applicant.
Well, I asked.
Right, is that my understanding?
I asked the lawyer at our, what was it, the conference we went to in Rutland? Maybe that was the Board of Civil Authority.
I think it must have been.
But I asked him, because I gave him the situation where I said a lawyer came and said, you can't, lawyers can't be sworn in because they can't testify. And he shook his head, and he'd never heard of such a comment. And he was a lawyer for Vermont cities and towns. So I think if we need to change our rules saying that if we can in fact swear a lawyer in, and he can.
But if he refuses, and I think he was
If he refuses,
refusing,
yes,
then we deny.
We can deny.
It was BS in it.
And Garrett went on to say that. He says, if an applicant or appellant or their representative does not provide sufficient, relevant, and reliable evidence for the DRB to rule in its favor, then the DRB has no alternative but to deny the application.
There we go.
So, maybe we could beef up our rules of procedure. But the fact is, if they can't provide the evidence you're looking for,
Yes.
then.
Was there anything procedurally special about it because it was an appeal of a zoning action as opposed to a normal hearing?
He didn't make any differentiation between an appellant or an applicant. He considers them the same.
Okay, is that it? Anything else? Anyone?
Move to adjourn?
Move to adjourn, is there a second? No discussion needed, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. We're all done, Kathy. Thank you.